All right. So I know we're probably going to have more and more people joining us as we go, but let me quickly go ahead and introduce myself to you guys. My name is Craig Grant. I am the CEO of RETI, which stands for the Real Estate Technology Institute. And I'm an international speaker in just about anything techies, technology, social media, cybersecurity. And in fact, I wrote CRS's cybersecurity course and recently helped NAR rewrite ePro because cybersecurity is one of my major topics, and that's what we're going to really talk about today. So one thing real quick before we get into this, but feel free to ask me questions as I go in the chat or the Q&A. In fact, I'm going to put this into the chat room right now. Feel free to ask questions however you guys want. And then one thing that I do differently than a lot of other speakers is I do share my entire slide decks with all my students, which you guys are my students today. So if you do want to download every slide you're about to see, in fact, if you do download the class, it's much, much more than what we're going to cover today because we're just doing an hour session. And this class is built out for much longer than 1 hour. But all you got to do is go to reti.us/CG event. You'll see it's a very basic sign-in form. Just your name and email address is all you have to input. And then once you hit submit, you'll see right away on the confirmation screen, click here to go download any of Craig's classes. You also get an email that'll be sent to you with the same link. So if you want to go download it tomorrow or on another device, whatever, you'll also get an email where you can download the class materials as well. And by the way, before we kind of get into the fun of what we're going to cover today, I also say that we got a real quick thing we want to do, which is kind of thank the entities that are bringing this to us today. And that is the National Association of Realtors, also the Charleston Trident Association of Realtors. They were able to secure the NAR grant, which provides funding to help realtor associations implement a safety program or feature for their members and encourage ongoing awareness of realtor safety. And also, of course, South Carolina Realtors for bringing you guys this session today. And by the way, if you are interested in the NAR safety program grant, we're providing you a link here where you can go check that out on NAR's website, or you can contact Brianne, and I hope I get her name right, Gingrich, and there's her phone number and email address if you do want to learn more about the NAR safety program grant that CTAR was able to achieve. So congrats to CTAR. Pretty sweet that they were able to achieve this. Only a few associations in the country were able to do so. All right, so that being said, let's kind of get into what we're going to cover today, which is how to really protect yourself as an individual consumer, and more importantly, as a realtor and a broker in charge, because you got a lot more responsibility than the average person when it comes to the cyber world. And here are the scary facts of where we are right now in the cybersecurity world. At any given moment, there's over 1 million different viruses and malware out on the internet coming after you, coming after your devices and your accounts and your data, but even more importantly, from a legal side of things, your customers' data as well. And in fact, a lot of times when I do more of a live event, not a Zoom event, I'll put up a site on the screen like Bitdefender. One, it kind of looks cool and it gets the crowd buzzing because it looks kind of like war games, just bombs going off all over the world, attacking other parts of the world. And what this really is those million viruses and malware being spread in real time all around the globe. And if you go to a site like this, it won't take you very long to catch on a very scary trend. So the first column, and by the way, this little screenshot is a 2-minute snapshot. So just in 2 minutes of activity, this is what happened when I went to the site. So the first column shows the origins, which countries are creating the viruses and creating the malware and all the cyber crime. And by the way, I didn't get lucky. United States is always one of the highest countries doing the hacking and creating the problems. The second column is what kind of virus or malware is being spread. And the third column is the really bad trend. Which countries are the targets the hackers are going after? And again, I didn't get lucky. The United States is always the #1 target of the world, and we're #1 by far for a lot of reasons, which we don't have a lot of time to get into. But the bottom line is the hacking world and the cybercrime world comes after America like crazy. And by the way, you may think the huge corporations are the real targets of the cyber criminals, but the reality is a breach of a major company isn't as frequent as you think it is. But the two targets of hackers is the average consumer and small business owner. In fact, every single day in the United States, 30,000 consumers and small business owners are the victim of some form of digital crime. I can guarantee you everybody in this class has had some kind of digital crime happen to you at some point. An account of yours being hacked or breached, your credit card being compromised, your credit itself being affected. I mean, it happens to everyone. I'm a security freak. And last year, twice my credit card got compromised. In fact, the replacement credit card showed up in the mail already activated before it even reached me. There was nothing I could do. And the cyber criminals can run the same scams on us over and over and over and have almost zero risk of getting caught. And if you're really trying to figure out why are they doing this and how are they getting away with it, right? How is our government stepping up and stopping 30,000 consumers being a victim every day? Well, the first thing is when you look at how and why is this happening, what we grew up with organized crime was essentially the mafia. And the way the mafia really operated was very local, intimidation, and extortion. So they kind of bullied and dominated their own communities, but every mobster ended up either underground or in jail. And then organized crime syndicates from around the globe caught on to the idea. Why should we ever do any crimes in our own communities, even our own countries? We could be the ones creating cyber criminal schemes and viruses and malware and ransomware and different things we're going to talk about. And then we can do it on the other side of the globe and have no risk of getting caught. So this is not just a bunch of kids that are talented trying to figure out how to make some money on the side. This is huge business now, highly funded, highly organized. In fact, you're hearing more and more over the last few years about actual governments being involved in creating hacks and malware and military units and things like that, because there's very less of getting caught and there's billions of dollars on the line. So this is kind of how it's happening. And if you're really trying to figure out, well, how are they getting away with it though? How are they able to pull off all this crime? Well, you probably have heard of the term dark web before, especially if you watch cyber, kind of spy movies or TV shows or read those kinds of books. The dark web is thrown around a lot in that kind of spy genre. And you probably thought it was some made up Hollywood or fictional kind of a deal. Well, the dark web is not made up, it is real. And what it is a totally separate internet. Now, just so you know, you cannot connect to the dark web using a normal web browser, such as Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, whatever browser you like to use. You need a separate little program called a torrent to connect and log on to the dark web. And these little torrent programs are untraceable, which means you have no idea who's using that torrent, where in the world they're doing this from, what device they're using, or anything about them. It's completely anonymous logging on to the dark web. And everything paid for in the dark web uses some form of digital currency like Bitcoin, which is also untraceable. So you have to do who's there and how they're paying for things, which really means you can buy anything horrible on our planet on the dark web, such as people like sex trade or slavery, child pornography, weapons and drugs, people's identities, their logins and passwords, and a whole lot more. So for example, when a website or a company gets hacked, let's just use that T-Mobile hack from a few weeks ago. 100 million T-Mobile customers' information was compromised in that hack. Well, by now, those hackers have already sold that data for the 100 million customers on the dark web and probably made several $billion doing it. 100 million accounts is a lot of information to sell. So this is what happens is they take information, go to the dark web and start auctioning it up for sale. And if you want to hear about the dumbest argument of all time, the US government is the one that created the dark web. They thought they created a separate internet just for our government to use and nobody else would ever find out about it. But the first government employee to share it with one of their geek buddies, shared it with another buddy, and now it's Pandora's box. We can't shut it down or stop it. You cannot remove information off the dark web. So this is how drug cartels and ISIS and everything else horrible on our planet, they all do their business through the dark web. And by the way, if you don't think you've ever been compromised or put on the dark web, this is a website you can go to just to do a quick little search and see if your email address has ever been compromised and put on the dark web, called haveibeenpawned.com. And I just put that link into the chat room. But all you got to do is type your email address into the search bar. And within seconds, you'll know if your email address was ever involved in a data breach. And it'll show you for every individual data breach when it happened, how it happens, and what kind of information they got out of that hack about you. Was it just your email address and your password? They also get your social security number, your birth date, what information they get in each one of these individual hacks. And the odds are you're going to be there unless you have a brand new email account, because just about everything has been compromised at some point these days. So this would not even be a full understanding of what's about you on the dark web, just if your email account was involved. It would not tell if your social security number's out for sale, your driver's license number, your credit cards, or anything else. Just was your email address involved any breaches? And by the way, we're not going to get into every single individual hack, but we do want to quickly address what I really consider probably the worst one of all time, at least from a real estate standpoint, because it's the one that could screw up a transaction the fastest. So in other words, one of your agents could be working with a buyer with an 850 credit score, amazing credit. And then you get that dreaded call from the lender 3 days before the closing. What the heck did your customer just do, your buyer do? They just went out and bought a car the same week of the deal of the closing? Are they stupid? And if you don't know which hack I'm talking about, it's Equifax. Equifax had a total breach back in 2019, and they are one of the 3 major credit bureaus. So you could have perfect credit, and all of a sudden somebody going up a new line of credit in your name because of this hack. So here's the deal. You yourself as a regular consumer, or if you are a practicing agent as well, you should have your credit frozen 365 days a year. But you should be training all of your agents that they should be training all their customers. They should have their credit frozen, not just at Equifax, but all 3 major credit bureaus, 364 days a year. And the reason why it's one less day for your buyers is what you really do when you freeze your credit is you log into each of the 3 websites individually. It's free and takes 20 seconds to do this. And you just hit the freeze button. And what freezing credit really does, it means no new lines of credit could ever be opened while the credit is frozen. It does not affect the credit score at all. The score can still go up and down as it normally would have. And a vendor could still check your credit score or worthiness. All it means is no new lines can be opened. So again, your credit should be frozen 365 days a year. Train your customers that they should have their credit frozen 364. And the reason is the morning of the closing, they would log into the 3 different credit bureaus, unfreeze their credit, and 15 minutes later, that new line of credit can be opened, and now the closing can happen. So just the morning of the closing, unfreeze it, and then later when it goes through that day, log back in, refreeze the credit at all 3 bureaus again. But again, really every day of the year, your credit should always be frozen. That way nobody can buy a car or anything like that without your knowledge. All right, why is this topic of just cyber crime and everything else so important to real estate and to your real estate company? Well, first of all, you probably don't know this, but real estate is now the number 5 most targeted industry for cyber crime. We're going to talk about some of the major scams they're doing coming after real estate, but real estate is a huge, huge target. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is whether it's you yourself as a broker, or if you talk to any of your agents and ask them, hey, have you ever had any training on cybersecurity? I guarantee you the majority of them are going to say, nope, not even a second of it. And the biggest problem is, I always say the minute somebody becomes a realtor, they're already set for failure in the cybersecurity world, because you got to take your oath to the code of ethics. And Article 1-9 of the Standard of Practice basically states one of the primary duties of a realtor is the preservation and storage of everything related to your business, all your communications, all your documentation and data and everything else has to be collected and stored. And then the typical realtors had no training how to properly do it. And I'm sure most of you brokers in this class are not providing this kind of training to your agents. And I can just tell you honestly, guys, I'm one of a handful of instructors in this industry that covers this topic and does it well. And these are usually not the best attended classes, right? How many of your agents are going to cybersecurity courses when they're offered at the board? But the bottom line is, this is a topic that's very underserved. And the typical realtor, again, is set up for failure right away because you got to collect and store and no training how to properly do it. And if you're really trying to figure out why are they going after real estate so much, I always say there's 2 sides to the coin. There's the customer and then there's the real estate professional. On the customer side, first of all, you are always dealing with huge transactions in the real estate world. Even a vacant lot's going to be a minimum of 5 figures, right? Plus the transactions being done by two parties that are typically complete strangers. And only the strangers, the buyer and the seller, typically have no communication amongst them. Almost all communications handled by the realtors, which means it's very easy to trick or manipulate your customers. All right, I saw a question in the chat. Jen asked, why aren't brokers, why we aren't, because brokers haven't been trained how to protect their files either. 100% agree, Jen. Okay, it's not just your agents. Typical brokers had no training on this as well. 100% agree. Okay, so again, on the customer side, big transactions between strangers with very little communication. Second thing is, there's also a total lack of awareness by most consumers that real estate is now the number 5 most targeted industry. And even if they know about stuff like wire transfer fraud, they might have heard of it, but they totally is well, it can't happen to me. They're not coming after my little transaction in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. They're going after the stuff in Miami, New York, LA. They're not worried about this little transaction. They are, and they're going after all levels in the real estate industry. And there's also heavy use on the customer side of free email accounts, which are very easy to manipulate and are commonly used in scams. And the typical customer you're working with is not very tech savvy and doesn't have great security in place. Okay. So all this makes the customer an easy target to manipulate. And on the other side of it is the real estate professional, which would include the brokers. So first of all, a lot of agents and brokers use free email accounts, which is a total no-no. I'm hoping that most of you in this class are providing your agents company email accounts that use your website address from the company. First of all, it's smart to do for compliance. It's also smart to do for recruitment and retention. Once I give you email address, you can't get away very easily. But also at the same time, by providing them a company email account, it's much harder to spoof it. Okay. So a lot of reasons why you should be providing your agents their own email accounts. But again, a lot of people in this industry don't use professional email accounts, use free ones. And the typical realtor before they come to my class has very poor security, just a reality. Okay. Also, there's a total lack of standardization in the real estate world and heavy reliance on third-party vendors. And what I mean by lack of consistency, you could have a couple of your agents, not only that work for you in the same company, they can be on the same team and they can still use different CRMs, different contracts and form management programs, and different tools in the process. And that means all I got to do is maybe compromise one of the vendors or find one little wrinkle in the transaction that's inconsistent and manipulate that. And then to me, the biggest one here is total lack of training in the real estate industry, whether it's your agents or you at the brokerage level on this topic. Okay. So all of this makes real estate a major target in the cybercrime world. So what we're going to learn, I'm going to pack as much in as I can into this hour, is we are going to talk about how the internet and a lot of the tools that you and your agents are using in the business can be pretty dangerous. But we're going to quickly teach you is how to protect yourself, but more importantly, your clients from cybercrime and hopefully protect the company all at the same time. Okay, so we're going to try to pack in as much as we can to teach you about this. And as I get into the actual content, I would say there's 3 major concepts I want you guys to have in your head. The first concept is what I call case in the neighborhood. And what it means is, let's just say I'm a thief and I'm trying to decide which house in a block I want to break into. And let's just say Leanne's house is the first house in the block. She has a nice tall gate surrounding the perimeter of her property, really good exterior lighting. And I even see a couple cameras exposed on the outside of her property. And then right next door is Carrie's property. And no offense, I'm about to rob your house, Carrie, because you don't have good exterior lighting, you don't have a gate, and there's no cameras exposed. So if I'm a thief, which house am I going to break into? Obviously be Carrie's. And you got to realize cyber criminals work in the exact same fashion. The more little layers of defense you put in that makes your device more protected, the more it keeps people out. Because if a hacker wants you and they're good and they're motivated, there is nothing you do to keep out a good hacker or cyber criminal. But what they really do is they look for the least amount of work or resistance. So everything I teach in the class is Here's a little problem. Here's an easy solution to go home and implement. And now we got to make our house more like Leanne's and less like Carrie's. The second major concept, which is huge for you at the brokerage level, is what's called the 1 week link in the chain. And what it means is over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to make you better at your security and understanding what needs to be solved back at home and back at the office. But all it takes is one person in your sphere that doesn't get cybersecurity, and you are still vulnerable either at the personal level or at the company level. And what I mean by that is you need to make sure you're going home and you're sharing this information, because let's say at the company level, you don't know who in your company doesn't understand cybersecurity and has really bad passwords or doesn't have antivirus protecting their mobile devices, things like that we're going to talk about. You don't know if it's this person in your company or that one or that one. Okay. By the way, it's her. Okay. So as the broker, you've really got to take this into account and share this information as much as possible after the class. Okay. Because you have no idea if it's one of your agents that could be compromised, an assistant, a transaction coordinator, internal staff, custodial services, vendors, your friends and your family, or even you could be the weakness. So that's what I mean by you got to really understand the 1 week link in the chain and share this info, which is why the third big concept is what I call be the coach. And again, I'm happy if you want to go home and download and print out this entire class, not the 1 hour version, the whole thing, and share it with your agents, share it with your family members that live in your household, stuff like that, because all it takes is one person. So either share it with them or bring in someone like me who can train them on it, because this is, again, I can make you safer, but all it takes is one person. All right, so that's kind of our little intro. And just so you guys know, there are so many different kinds of viruses and malware out there coming after us at all time. In fact, the cyber criminals create new techniques all the time to kind of outsmart what's already out there. So we're not going to learn any kind of definitions at all. What we're really going to focus on as much as I can in this time is how not to get a virus or malware. And the major reason is if you get a virus or a malware, that is a cyber criminal's entry point to do big damage, meaning now they can, let's say, get into one of your accounts and start getting the information they're looking for, or they can install a virus, a bit worse virus into your device and really do bad damage. So we got to make sure we don't get viruses and malware. And one of the major reasons is a lot of people think cyber criminals are out there just for money. Well, you got to realize one of the major things they're looking for is what's called personally identifiable information, or PII. And in the real estate world, we come in contact with PII all the time. And you also got to know you are legally responsible to protect PII if you or your agents come in contact with it. So real quickly, every state in the country has a PII law. So I'm going to put this link into the chat room. If you are licensed or your company operates in more than one state, I will put into the chat for you this link that allows you to go check out the PII laws for the other 49 states. I've, of course, pulled South Carolina's laws. Okay. So we have code 38-99-10 all the way to -100. So first of all, it gets into defining what PII is in the state of South Carolina. If you ever are collecting a person's name, which could be their first name and their last name, or their first name's initial and their last name, and this information is combined with any of the following 5 items, and these 5 items are not either encrypted or redacted. In other words, you're allowed to collect someone's social security number, but it will be encrypted in the system you're storing it in. That way you can't read all 8 digits of it. Okay. It's hidden under asterisks or coded where you can't read it. So the 5 things that have to be protected in the state of South Carolina is someone's social security number, someone's driver's license number, or non-driver identification card or number. So any government issued ID number or card, military IDs, state university cards, non-driver's licenses, anything like that, that's government issued ID number or card has to be protected. Third would be any financial account information. such as their credit card numbers, their bank and routing numbers that are listed on a check, things like that. It's okay to collect a check from somebody, but if you are, you better make sure you're taking a black marker and redacting that account and routing number. Okay. And then anything that, let's say your website is collecting information, if you're collecting any of this kind of PII, the website itself that's collecting it has to be security and encoded. Okay. And then lastly would be biometric data. So if at any point you are collecting anyone's fingerprints, facial recognition, iris detection, anything like that, that is covered in the state of South Carolina. And not every state is doing biometrics yet. Okay. So this is what is considered PII in the state of South Carolina. And then also under -20, it basically states that any person operating a business in the state of South Carolina has to have a cybersecurity program in place to protect any PII you are collecting, which not every state has this clause. So I was actually very happy to find that South Carolina requires you to have a security policy in place. All right, so that is what PII is in the state of South Carolina. So this is what the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission's, their 5 recommended steps for cybersecurity. So step 1 is taking stock. Now that I've taught you what PII is, at some point after the class, you might want to sit down and really think through every part of your company's business. If let's say any of your agents do just a residential transaction with traditional financing, are they ever come in contact with PII? A property management or a rental agreement, do you ever come in contact with it? Maybe with a background check, commercial transaction, whatever. Really go through every aspect of the business and say, is anyone in our company ever coming in contact with PII? Because at the brokerage level, you're responsible for all this. So step 1 is taking stock. Step 2 is what we call scaling down, which means once you've done that taking stock assessment, could you maybe decide maybe we don't want to collect this information? Maybe we don't really need it. Or best case scenario, if you do need to retain this information, get it off you and your agent's plates. In other words, you push all information collection out to your vendors and say, we do not want to be in the middle. We will not allow any customers to send us information and then we'll pass it along to the vendor. Only let the vendor collect it, because the second your agent comes in contact with that, you're now legally responsible to protect it. Step number 3 is locking things up, which means if you are collecting information, you either have to encrypt it, so that way it's password protected and encoded, and you got to make sure, like we just talked about with -20, that you have a policy in place to protect this information you're collecting. Step number 4 is pitching it, which means yes, you're allowed to collect things, but also you have to get rid of and destroy it at some point, which we're going to talk about in 2 seconds. And then step number 5 to me is probably the most important thing, which is planning ahead. In other words, you got to have a plan in place just in case or assuming eventually there's going to be a disaster. If you have a plan in place, you'll have an action plan to follow. If you don't have a plan already prepared, you're going to be a chicken with your head cut off, and you're probably not going to handle that situation very well. All right, Michael just asked a question that came in from Facebook. How do safety apps taking pics relate to this info, whether taking facial pic or pic of driver's license? So good question. If you're talking about the biometric data, a picture of someone's face is not necessarily biometric data unless you're using that to identify them. Okay, so if it's doing any kind of lookup and connection, this person is connected to that person, that would fall under PII. But just taking someone's picture does not. All right, when you get into data disposal, again, you are legally required to collect information, right? But you can't just keep it forever. So the same site that I gave you before for PII, the same site also has every state's data collection laws as well, or data disposal. Okay, so I just put that link into the chat room again. So when it's a physical document, oh, and by the way, here is South Carolina's laws. It basically states that you have to destroy information, either shredding, erasing, or other means that makes it unreadable or undecipherable. And it also says that you have to make sure you're disposing of information in accordance with subsection A. So when it comes to a physical document, that's obvious, shred or burn it, okay? When it comes to a digital document, it's a little more complicated than saying you delete it, because all you do when you delete a file is you're moving what's called the pointer, which kind of says, all right, the file is gone, but you can retrieve the file and reactivate the pointer at any time. So if you ever want to sell or donate anything with a hard drive in it, deleting is not sufficient. You have to basically wipe the information or overwrite it. And if you're looking for a free way, easy way to do so, you can use a little free program called dban.org, installed onto a little disk or a drive, boot up your computer from that disk, and it'll wipe the information completely off that computer's hard drive. And just so you guys know, if you think I'm just talking about, let's say, a computer when I talk about an external hard drive, I'm not. Anything that there's other items you are using that have external hard drives you may not be thinking about, such as your printers and your fax machines. They have hard drives in them as well. So again, if you're going to sell or donate, let's say, a fax machine, you'd want to wipe its hard drive the same way you would wipe a computer's. Okay. So you can run dban to do the same things. And I saw somebody ask for the link again to download the class. There you go. Okay. But dban is a free, safe way to get information out of the drive and wipe it. All right. So as I mentioned, we're not going to learn about specific viruses and malware. We're going to focus on how not to get them. And just so you guys know, when I teach the full class on this topic, not the 1 hour version we're doing today, I go through a 10-step process. I say, here are the 10 major issues you probably have right now in your cyber world, and let's solve each one of these 10 items. Here's your problem. Here's a solution to go home and implement. So we don't have time to knock out all 10 of these in the next half hour, but this is what we typically cover in the full class. So if you're interested, you can always talk to your local association about that. But let's kind of focus on the major things that are targeting the real estate industry and that you need to know about as the broker in charge. So the first one would be listing scams. And I'm sure you guys have had to deal with these before because they're prevalent everywhere. The way they work is a con artist typically will post a listing from your company on a site like Craigslist or Zillow, but they do it at as a rental at an extremely low price. So let's just say a normal rental property in your area goes for $2,500 a month. They're going to put it up on Craigslist for $1,250 a month. Then they write the ad copy, say, if I relocated out of the area for a job transfer, I need to move someone in immediately because I'm pretty desperate. I'll waive all the background fees and the checks. Just send me the first 2 months check and I'll move you in immediately. And you even hear about extreme cases where, let's say the listing is on the market right now. They'll go to that property, cut off the lockbox, have someone sign a rental agreement, and now you have a legal battle to get them out because they have squatter's right and a signed rental agreement. So listing scams can be a nightmare unless you know about them before they become a nightmare. And that is where creating what's called a Google alert comes in. So it's just google.com/alerts. You could just type in the address, the MLS number, whatever for a property, and then you're going to get an email anytime something new hits the internet about that property. So you're not going to get a Google alert email every day, but if all of a sudden that listing is up on Craigslist, now you'll get an email from Google saying, hey, that listing is something new about it online. So all you got to do is quickly eyeball that email. If you see it somehow got up on Craigslist without you or your agent's permission, now you got a scam to go take care of before it becomes the nightmare. So this would help you hopefully detect it right away before it becomes a major issue. All right, the second major thing we're going to tackle is called ransomware. And ransomware is the #1 thing cyber criminals are doing right now. In fact, ransomware incidents are up over 2,000% since the pandemic started. And what ransomware basically is, this is not exclusive just to real estate. This is happening to everybody, even at the consumer level. But what it is let's say you or one of your agents clicks on a link, and that link allows the hackers to install a malware, into their device that now can encrypt the entire device and hold you ransom for a sum of money, which is why it's called ransomware. And they typically want you to pay them in Bitcoin because, again, it's untraceable and you can't take it back. So this is what ransomware is. And again, it is exploding. They're doing it like crazy right now. Now, let's just say they know they've hit you or one of your agents at the individual level. The typical request can be between $500 and $1,500. If they know hit your company and your network, and now they're encrypting everything connected to your network, the minimum asking price is going to be around $10,000. And the top end, there is no top end. It can be as high as they want if they know they've hit a big enough network. In fact, I'm sure you guys remember a couple of months ago, we had that big Colonial Pipeline hack, the oil company that got nailed, that affected the whole Eastern Seaboard's oil. That was a $5 million ransomware attack because they know they hit something big. Okay. And the biggest problem is why I put it in that red box. What they tell you is you pay us this amount of money and we're going to provide you what's called a de-encryption key, a way to unlock your device or unlock your network and get it back. The problem is you can pay that huge amount of money and they can completely ghost you. They cannot respond to you at all and never hear from them ever again. Or they can know you're really desperate and come back to you with a second round ransomware request. All right, round two, now I want $25,000. So you never want to pay the ransom. The key is you got to make sure you and all your information and your company's information is backed up. But you don't want to do it with anything local, like a disk or a drive. You want to make sure all your information is backed up remotely out in the cloud. You can use a company like Carbonite or Google or Rackspace, there's Amazon. There's so many companies now where you can say, I want to back up everything out in the cloud at pretty low costs. And that way you're safe. Because let's just say they hit your company network or hit one of your devices. Yeah, maybe that device might be toast. You might have to replace that computer. But if all your information is backed up in the cloud and it's somewhere else, they can't encrypt that. You can always re-download all your information to the next device and not lose all your data and information. So backing up in the cloud is a huge, huge important thing. You got to make sure your agents are doing it at their own personal level, and at the company level, you should have everything backed up in the cloud as well. All right, the next thing we're going to tackle is phishing and especially wire transfer fraud. And by the way, there's two kinds of phishing scams. They're the ones everyone gets every day. They send the message out to 1 million people. So many people fall for it. And there's what's called spear phishing, which wire transfer fraud is a perfect example of, where they're going after one person. So wire transfer fraud is rampant all throughout the industry. It's the worst thing that's hurting us. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to explain to you what it is, how it works, and more importantly, how to defend you and your company and your customers from it. So the way wire transfer works is typically a cyber criminal is going to hack into or kind of compromise the email account. Sometimes it's the realtor's email account, but it's usually whoever handles the financial side of your transaction. So I'm pretty sure that South Carolina uses title companies, but other states use escrow or real estate attorneys. But let's just use a title company as our example for this scenario. Well, the hackers hack into, let's say, the title agent's or company's email account, and they get in there and they want to learn as much as they can, as quick as they can. The first thing they want to learn is the exact look and feel of all their messages. Do they put the company logo in their emails anywhere? Does the agent's signature have their profile picture? Is it a circle or a square? How do they display their information? What kind of words they like to use? They want to learn what the title company's emails look like. That way they can make one that looks identical to it. They also want to learn the identity of everyone involved in the transaction. So let's just say Rick is our buyer, Sally is the buyer's agent, and Sarah is the title agent. Well, the email is going to look like it's coming from Sarah, the title agent, going to Rick, but they're going to purposely put Sally's name in there. I just spoke to your agent, Sally. She asked me to get a hold of you, providing new wire and transfer instructions. Please click here to complete the transaction. And that way it looks so legit to Rick. And then third, they want to learn the exact time in the transaction. They want to know the closing is on Friday at 3 o'clock. That way they can time their scam at the exact right moment, which you'll understand more in a second. And by the way, if I've hacked into your email account or your email server, I can do whatever the heck I want to your account or server. So for example, if they are lazy, they're going to create a second email account. it's going to come from sarah.zebed@titlecompany.com instead of Sarah Zebed. You don't notice the little dot and they trick you. Or if they're not lazy, and most of them are not anymore, they're getting very sophisticated with this, it's going to come out of Sarah's real email account. But they're going to go into her account and create a couple of rules. The first one is if we ever send any emails from our IPs, hide it in a folder that we created in Sarah's account. She doesn't know we created. And here's the most important one. We're going to send our email on Monday or Tuesday for that Friday close. As soon as Rick clicks on that email and opens it, start the clock for the next 48 hours. During that 48-hour period, block all outgoing emails from the title company, only allow emails to be delivered from our IPs of our devices. So the title company has no idea we're doing this, but we've blocked their communications, and the only messages the customer is that Rick is receiving is one from us, the cyber criminals. And the entire intent is to trick Rick enough into getting him to click on that link and doing wire instructions to a fraudulent account. Now, by the way, let's just say Rick calls up Sally and says, hey, I just transferred over $380,000 on Tuesday for that Friday close. Of course, both of them would start panicking and freaking out. But the good news is, by US law, money has to stay in US bank accounts for 48 hours. It can go from one account to another, but it can't leave our shores for 48 hours. So if Rick tells Sally about this, the immediate action would be to contact the FBI, and the FBI can stop and shut down everything. They can seize all the assets. Now, is the closing going to happen on Friday? Nope. It's going to be delayed significantly, but at least your customer doesn't lose their life savings. So if they tell you within 48 hours, you have a chance. Once it gets beyond the 48 hours, that money is transferred offshore. You never get a dime back ever again. And by the way, not just for wire transfer fraud, for any form of digital crime, E&O insurance does not cover one penny. I'll teach you in a moment what does. So let's first teach you the 4 steps how to defend yourself, your clients, and your company from wire transfer fraud. So first of all, you got to understand how regular phishing works, the messages we all get every day. Any message you receive these, always look at the header information, who the sender really is. If they're claiming they're working for Bank of America, they're definitely going to use a bankofamerica.com email address. You got to look and pay attention. They can change that O to a 0. They can change an I to a 1. They could use a free email account like a Yahoo account. Okay. Always look at the actual sender's email address and make sure it is legit. Also look for things like spelling, grammar, and colloquialisms, which are sayings. 99% of these come from outside the United States. So they try to sound American and usually fail miserably. And then third, always look but don't click on the actual links. Because again, they can change that O to a 0. They can slip a dot in the middle of the address. Always look but don't click at links. But the problem is, none of these 3 items is going to help you or your customers for wire transfer fraud, because it might come from the real email address. They're going to make sure it's spelled right and looks right and everything. So the biggest thing you got to make sure you get through your head as an individual, train your customers and your agents, is stop clicking and go to the web browser yourself. Don't copy and paste the link. Type in the main website address, because if you know what links are real and which ones are dangerous these days. So stop clicking and go to the browser. Step 2 is the first day you and your agent start working with a brand new client. In that initial meeting, they should be educating them about wire transfer fraud. Everything I just taught you about what wire transfer is, how it works, and how it would destroy their life in one click. The customers need to understand that on day 1. Also, you should be teaching your customers to be really wary or on their toes for any last minute changes close to the closing. They really try to time it a few days out. So tell your customers that last 10-day period or so, anything out of the ordinary, contact whoever you need to make sure everything is legit. Always be on your toes close to the closing. And then I'm pretty sure South Carolina has created a wire transfer disclosure agreement, an actual contract you can have a customer sign saying that they have been explained wire transfer. That should happen on day 1 as well. I've explained this to you. Please sign here. You want as much CYA, cover yourself, for you and your company as you can. And then if you're smart, you might want to take it a step further. And when I say you, this is something you might want to require all your agents to have, is a legal disclaimer in their email signatures. And I just put that whole disclaimer into the chat room for you, but I'll quickly read it in case you're trying to write it down. It says, important notice. As a realtor, neither I or my company, you want to identify the company as well, will ever be involved in providing wire and transfer instructions. Never trust instructions sent via email. Cyber criminals are hacking email accounts and sending emails with fake wiring instructions. These emails are convincing and sophisticated. Always independently confirm wire instructions in person or via telephone call to a trusted and verified phone number. Never wire money without double checking that wire instructions are correct. So if I were you, I would require every agent in your company to have this in their signature, because you got to make sure you're doing as much COA as possible. Because if one of your customers loses to wire transfer, loses their life savings, they're absolutely going to sue your agent and your company without a doubt. But if you can go in for a judge and say, look, on day one, they signed that agreement saying that my agent explained wire transfer instructions to them. During the time they worked together, the buyer and my agent exchanged 39 emails. Every single one of them had this legal disclaimer in there reminding them that we're not involved in this and they should double check their instructions. It'll be a whole lot more COA in front of the judge versus saying, you know what, I teach my agents to tell what their customers about this, and I guess this customer just didn't really understand it enough. Okay, you got to get as much legal protection as you can. So having the legal signature is a smart thing to do. And then number three, and this at the broker level is extremely important. If you are providing, let's say, a title company, a real estate attorney to your agents to use, that company of choice, you better do your homework on them and make sure they're doing the proper things to protect you at the company level. So do their homework on them, ask them the important questions, and ask them, you know, what are you doing? Are you involving phone calls? Is there a safe way to upload and exchange documents? What are you doing to protect me and my clients? Oh, and by the way, Michael just put in the chat room something very helpful. He said that the SCR form 610 is that wire transfer agreement form. Okay, the one you can have your client sign. So appreciate that, Michael. Another thing that you should always have your agents do when they work with a new customer is tell them, take their phone out of their pocket right now, and let's create a contact on your phone for the vendor, let's say the title agent or company. And then you give that buyer one additional instruction. If they ever get a phone call, somebody that claims they work for the title company, your buyer says, I'm sorry, I have to hang up and I will call you back. You always want your buyer to initiate all phone calls. And the reason is it's very easy these days to spoof on caller ID to make it look like they're the title company and not really be the title company, which is why you always want your customer to initiate all phone calls. And then another little additional tip or thing you might want to recommend or require of your vendors is they should come up with a secret passcode for each individual transaction that only the title company and the buyer knows. Your agents and you, the broker, should never know the secret passcode. Only the buyer and the vendor should. And the reason is it's another way to blow up another fake phone call. Hi, this is Craig from the title company. All right, Craig, what's my secret passcode? I don't know, turtles. You're a liar, and I hang up on you if you don't know my secret passcode. So again, ask your vendors to provide this. You also might want to introduce your buyer to that vendor earlier on so they get to know them, their voices and personalities. And you definitely should make sure that your vendor has the proper insurance in place. Because let's just say your real estate attorney was the source of this entire problem. Their accounts got breached. Guess who is now responsible for your business loss, your legal fees, and everything else? But if they don't have the right insurance in place, they could fold up tent, shut down the business, create a new DBA a month later, and you're screwed and doesn't because they didn't have the right insurance. So make sure your vendors have cyber insurance. And then step 4, at the agent level, your agents, you definitely should start recommending they get cyber insurance. And at the company level, you definitely should be having cyber insurance at the company level as well. And when you look into packages, you could say, I just want to buy umbrella coverage for the whole company. I actually want to protect my agents and buy it for them, or leave it up to my agents to buy themselves. But you can buy coverage for as low as $150 a year. That'll get you about $100,000. That will not go very far in real estate. So typically what's recommended in the real estate world is $1 million coverage, which is typically more around $1,000 per year per person. But it's becoming a necessity. It really, really is. And if you really don't know much about cyber insurance, first of all, it's a totally separate line of insurance from your general liability and errors and admission. That's specifically meant for anything tech or digital related. And any good cyber liability insurance policy will have both first party and third party coverage. So first party coverage is basically you and your company. So things like data destruction, extortion, theft, hacking, or what are called DDoS attacks. Let's say somebody's trying to crash your servers or your website. That's a DDoS attack. So that's all covered under first party coverage. And then third party coverage would be your customers and your vendors. So if your customer has any kind of financial loss or harm, that would be covered under cyber liability insurance. Or your vendor is the reason for the breach, you'd have some coverage there as well. Even things like copyright or media liability is covered under third party coverage. Okay. And then what cyber insurance really includes is financial loss, legal fees, public relations and reputation management services. And here's a huge one, a team of experts to call on before, during, and after an incident. What I mean by a team of experts, you'd be able to get on the phone anytime, even before an incident happens, with a forensic expert. How did this breach happen to us and what really happened and who did it? A security expert, what's wrong with our setup right now and what could we do to improve our security? A legal expert, lawyers, get on the phone with them. And a PR expert, again, before, during, and after an incident. And just to kind of throw this out there, you get on the phone with a tech forensic expert, $500 an hour minimum. Security experts, usually $400 to $500 minimum. How much does it cost to get a lawyer on the phone these days? So just an hour or two on the phone with some of these people pays for the policy for the year all by itself. And again, you're still getting the legal cost and the business financial loss and everything else included as well. And as I've already mentioned, both general liability and errors and omission insurance does not cover 1 penny of any form of digital crime. So if you are in the market for cyber insurance, you might want to check out cyberpolicy.com. They're NAR's official partner for this. And with this vendor, NAR actually vetted them and created special policies specifically for real estate agents and companies and associations. So if you are in the market for this, you might want to check out cyberpolicy.com. Kind of going the next step is, and I'm sure most of you in this class probably do not have what's called a cyber policy manual in place. I'm sure you have a regular policy manual while your agents, anyone who works for a company can and can't do, but you might not have a cyber part of your policy manual. And that is something you definitely should have these days. Because as the company owner, I know they aren't technically employees, but they work for your company, which means you have a lot of legal responsibility and liability for them and their actions. And as the company owner, you can define what kinds of tools they have to have in place, what kind of things you will allow to do, even in their personal usage of technology, stuff like that. So as the company owner, you can say you have to have antivirus installed on everything and use two-factor authentication once available and all these different things. You can require this to happen. And other than the fact this is making you and your company more secure, you got to realize cyber liability insurance is no different than any other kind of insurance. They look for reasons not to pay out on a policy claim. So if your agent did not have antivirus on their device and that's why they got hacked, sorry, we're not paying out this claim. So you want to include in your actual policy manual what's called an internet usage agreement, which is a contract they have to sign if they're going to work for your company that defines all these things. Now, good news, you don't have to truly hire a lawyer to make this happen because NAR has an entire set of policy tools on their site for agents and company owners and association staff members. So I'll put all these links in the chat room for you. But again, you could also download the class. But these links would help you create that policy manual and consider what kind of things you want to put in there and stuff like that. And then the other thing you might want to start thinking about more if you're not currently doing it is providing your agents and anyone that works for your company training on this topic. Okay. Whether it's you really pushing your local association to bring in an instructor like me, or you actually providing in-house training, but a good policy is to provide ongoing training to anyone that works for your company. And even doing what's called stress testing. Maybe you'll send out phishing emails and see how many agents fall for it. All right, a good percent failed. Let's have some training on that topic. But providing training and providing even tests to see how things are going is a smart thing to do, because again, you got to make sure your company is safe in the long run. And then the last topic I'm going to squeeze in really quickly, because this is the newest legal issue you really got to worry about these days, is ADA compliance of your website. I'm sure you know what your building has to have for ADA compliance, things like railings and ramps, things like that. But when it comes to the internet, the US government still has not defined what ADA compliance is. But the bottom line is anything on the internet has to be used by any person with any disability. And the lawyers are now going after this like crazy, even though the government has not defined it. So at a minimum, you can have a little legal disclaimer on your site saying, hey, you're making every effort you can to make sure your site's compliant, but that would definitely not stop a lawsuit or a lawyer. Okay. So this is a little free test you could use called ace.accessibility.com. And what you do is you go there, type in your website address, and you can do a fast little test to see if your site is ADA compliant or not. And the truth is, unless you have a brand new website, I can almost guarantee you're going to fail this test, because web designers were not worried about this a year or two ago. They just weren't. So the odds are you're going to fail. And once you fail, you got a couple decisions to make. Number one, you could contact your website vendor and say, how much is it going to cost to fix our site and make it compliant? Probably going to be pretty expensive though. Number two, you can consider getting rid of your current site and getting a brand new one that is compliant. Or your third option is you can use either of these two tools, either Userway or Accessibility. So if you want to keep your current site but not blow it up, you can add either Userway or Accessibility, which are these little kind of plugins you put on your website. Somebody clicks on that little wheelchair icon, it pops up a little panel that gives them tools to use to make the site more compliant. The free versions of these help, but they would not stop a lawsuit. The paid pro versions of them guarantee compliance for around $50 a month. So again, you got some decisions. Do you get a brand new website? Do you fix your site? Or do you possibly go with the pro version of these to make your current site more compliant? But this has become a major reality, is a lot of lawsuits are being filed for ADA compliance. All right, so final thoughts, and I nailed it. We're right at the hour mark, but hopefully I've shown you in this hour, as a realtor and as a broker owner, you are definitely a target in the cybercrime world, but I tried to pack in as much as I could into this hour to make you and your company safer. Okay, so as I mentioned at the very beginning of the class, this is where you can go to download the entire class. And I'll put this back into the chat room again right now. Okay. And I know I took questions as we went, but let's just see if any of you guys have any questions on anything. And while I'm waiting on those questions, the other thing I'll throw in here, if you are interested in this topic, either for your company or at your local association, you can get all my information at that site as well. Okay. So, and I'll put my contact info into the chat also. So I just put all my name and my contact info into the chat at the same time. So any questions from anyone on anything we covered? Because again, I try to do as much as I could in the hour, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Okay, Joseph just asked, how do you get the pro version of Userway? So basically, when you go create your account at Userway, you just want to get the pro version of it. So then you become a paid customer. And what it really does is it'll also go through all your website's code, and they'll fix any non-compliant code of your website. and they give you a letter of authenticity saying your site's compliant. And if anyone actually still tries to sue you, they'll pay your legal fees if you have the pro version. So it's basically become a paid customer versus a free customer. Okay. Carolyn asked, is Google and Gmail safe? The truth is Google is probably the safest of all the major vendors to use. Now, have Google accounts been compromised? Tons of times, because Google has over 1 billion customers. But Google's system is safe. It's more about the customers. Oh, somebody just said I lost audio. So, hopefully we're almost wrapped up. So hopefully that comes back. Okay, people are saying they hear me now. Good. But again, Google is very safe. It's more about the customers that use Google. Sometimes they have weak passwords or they don't have good security, but Google security itself is top notch. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay, Liliana just asked, my website is through the company site, so I assume I'm covered. Liliana, again, odds are, unless you have a brand new website, it is not ADA compliant, because this was on no one's radar a year ago, 2-3 years ago. But lawsuits are now flying like crazy. So I would not assume just because your company gives you a website or whatever, that it is compliant. I would assume it's not, which is why I gave you that free test to look at. Carolyn asked about Outlook being good for security. Yes, unless your passwords to it stink. Rackspace is a very good vendor for doing cloud storage. You could always use them. Yes. And then Jackie asked about specific programs to encrypt info. If you download the class, I kind of give step-by-step instructions, how it's actually something you can do for free in almost any program. Like you can go into Word and encrypt a file, or you can encrypt entire folders. And in fact, I will quickly put into the chat all that little instructions how to encrypt. So there you go. That's how to encrypt on a window folder on a Windows device, on a Mac, or if you want to encrypt your entire devices. So I just put that all into the chat. Okay. I know we're a minute or two over. So Michael, is there anything, or Sharon, anything from the SCR side you guys want to mention or cover before we cut them loose?
We do just to give any brokers on this call, we do have another broker webinar October 14th. That's it might, I don't think it's just broker specific. I think it's for agents too, but it's tools that are helping agents win in this market, presented by Boomtown. So that's going to be at 2:00 on October 14th, which is this Thursday. But otherwise, I think I don't think we have any other announcements.
Okay. And I'm seeing a bunch of thank yous in the chat, guys. I appreciate that. Hope you guys really enjoyed this. And again, if you're interested in it for your company or association, you got my contact info. Feel free to contact me, but I hope you guys really enjoyed this.